Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Prosper series. My name is Adriana, and I support community at Celo. So the vision of this series, the purpose we're here, is to envision, ideate, and create a new world of prosperity for all. And so this is a weekly series. If you're new to this series, a special welcome to you. And to get started, I see some folks are already adding in where you are tuning in from. So let's get a sense of who's in our virtual room this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at, by sharing in the chat. So we have Marco from Portugal, Laurence in San Francisco, Megan in SoCal, Guy in Mallorca, awesome. Wade in Vancouver, hi Wade. Portland, more folks from San Francisco. Austria, awesome, welcome Victor. It's so fun. What a global community we have. So Prosper began as an in-person retreat. We held a retreat in November in the woods of Mendocino, California, to bring developers, designers, dreamers, and doers together around this question of how to create a beautiful world of prosperity for all. We were hoping to do another retreat this June, and of course, with the current COVID pandemic that we're in, we decided to bring this content online into bite-sized chunks in a weekly series so that we can continue to grow community around this very important topic right now. And so before we get started, as a way to invite in presence for today's session, I invite you to join me in a short meditation. So if you do feel comfortable, gently closing your eyes and take a few deep breaths here into your seat. And just feeling where your sit bones are touching the seat below you. And taking a few breaths here, noticing how the breath slows and deepens as your body relaxes, creating spaciousness for more thought, more creativity, imagination. Then breathing up into your heart. And in the words of Charles Eisenstein, how beautiful can life be? We hardly dare imagine it. So I invite us all to take a moment now to use our imagination to envision how beautiful can life be. Allowing any words, images, colors, sensations to arise in that heart space. And taking a few breaths here. And then after your next breath, gently opening up the eyes and coming back into our room. And so today, for creating this new beautiful world, I'm so excited to have the founders of Celo here with us for an intimate fireside chat. And so Celo is a platform that makes financial tools available to anyone with a mobile phone. And it's so exciting that the community was able to stand up this network on Earth Day on April 22nd. And then mainnet recently launched this past month. So this is a great opportunity for us to not only celebrate, but look back on the journey that is Celo and the learnings and challenges along the way. So I would like to introduce the founders, Rene, Marek, and Sep. I'm going to bring us all up onto the screen here. And so thanks so much, all of you, for joining today. So I would like to start out, I originally named this session The Gifts of Failure because I wanted it to be a story around overcoming challenge. So can you share a little bit about what failure means to you?
Yeah, I could lead in. I mean, this is a conversation that Adriana, you and I had a couple days ago. But basically, I think there's this wonderful book by, I think his name is James Carse. It's called Finite and Infinite Games, where he lays out this idea that there's two types of games. One is finite, which it has a clear end, and as a clear end, there's a clear winner and loser. And so the goal in the game, in a finite game, is to win. But in an infinite game, there's no end, and therefore there is no winner and there's no loser. And therefore you have a very different perspective on the game itself. You think about you think about things not in terms of winning and losing or success and failure, but you think about each thing that comes with more of a sense of like zoomed out perspective and a sense of wonder and a sense of true playfulness. And I think, I mean, we think about this as an infinite game. I mean, we think about this as something that we'd like to do for a long period of time. And therefore, there's not a sense of winning and losing. It kind of like, it's kind of like, so asking about like what our successes or failures have been like over the last 3 years is like saying, what have been your successes and failures in the first 3 minutes of that soccer game? You know, you just don't think about you don't think about it in the same way. So in any case, I mean, I think basically it's I think for all three of us, and something that I think a lot of us working on the protocol think about is how can we at each step better align with our mission, and how can we look at with wonder and with learning all of the things that arise along the way. So that I think is kind of the main thing that I take away when I think about that question.
That's beautiful. And so to that end, in terms of the energy, can we hear a little bit about how Celo started and the story behind how it got going?
Sure, and I can get us started, and Mary and Sep, feel free to join in. So about 10 years ago, we all met at MIT, and Marek and I were tinkering with an idea that was based on semantic web technologies, and kind of the idea was to help small businesses better manage their data online, which, you know, anyone who's been running a small business or has friends who do knows that can be quite painful. And, you know, in a way, what motivated us to do that was really this desire to level the playing field for the small guys and be able to keep competing with, you know, the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. And what was interesting about kind of, you know, from a technology perspective, going kind of deep down sort of the rabbit hole of, you know, semantic web and linked data was that it was actually conceptually, if we look back now, pretty similar to some of the concepts that we cherish in this kind of space, in this industry now. But it was a much smaller community, and the technologies were really at almost like, you know, we call it an academic stage, which was very little activity to kind of have a commercial drive towards actually kind of, you know, building kind of bigger, you know, bigger implementations or products around them. And so we were probably one of the few projects that tried to do that, and quickly kind of ran into limitations that we all, you know, everybody who's been in crypto has been running into, but just a much, you know, smaller number of people trying to actually push the ball forward and you know, solve things like scalability and performance. And so we ended up kind of, you know, being pretty pragmatic about it, and sort of, you know, just ending up adopting technology that in kind of spirit shared those methodologies, but was more kind of standard Web 2 technology. And so when that company, and, you know, when we sold that company to GoDaddy and spent some time there and kind of ended up coming out of that, we started brainstorming again. Now we were kind of, you know, getting up to speed on what had happened in the crypto space with Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it was fascinating because, you know, even in those early days, this is like late 2016, early 2017, you could already see a much bigger community that was forming, and new people coming into the space, new ideas coming into the space on a daily basis. And it was hard to kind of even keep up with everything that was happening. And, you know, in a way, it was great because it allowed us to kind of go back to some of these concepts but now apply them to some of the other problems that we were eager to kind of find solutions for. And specifically with all three of us having spent time kind of all around the world, and I think even with the GoDaddy experience, seeing the shortcomings of not having a functioning financial system in many parts of the world, felt like a massive opportunity space to start kind of diving in and seeing how this technology could provide solutions and bring better access to financial products and services to people wherever they may be. And so that was kind of maybe a little bit of the backstory, and maybe Marek or Sep, you guys want to chime in on some of the stories or kind of the specifics. But it was kind of a really interesting time to look back on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just saw Marco in the chat mention failing fast. One thing that we did when we started kind of this exploration is we actually created a list of 100 different ideas that we wanted to explore before deciding on the final area of focus. I think in general, as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to almost fall in love with your first idea. And so we wanted to mitigate that and avoid that by really first having a lot of free-form brainstorming, and then actually going in and looking at the ideas that we really thought were the most compelling. And we actually spent half a year exploring all of these different ideas, trying them out, and looking to see if they were worthy of being kind of picked as a thing that we wanted to work on for the next kind of number of decades. And so, that half year felt like time worth spent. And so Celo actually came out after we threw away 99 other ideas, which, I think really helps underscore just how much care we put into, finally settling on what is, such a beautiful and compelling thing to focus on.
And I'll add to that, like a lot of the early conversation was as philosophical as it was technical product. So we had this view that the blockchain reminded us that money is a technology. And money, in fact, has always been a technology, but it's difficult to remember that because its features haven't changed very much in the past 250 years. But as a technology, its features can change, and its features have as a widely used technology, its features have an impact on the society that uses them. And so a lot of the conversation were what would be the features of money that would lead to a more prosperous, a more sustainable, a more beautiful world. And we came to 5. The first is the idea of a universal basic income tied into the money system. The second is an idea by the economist Silvio Casal called demurrage, which he had observed that money, during times of recession, people tend to hoard money. But that intensifies the recession. And so he had this idea of how to address that by having a small fee on the holding of money that incentivizes the circulation of money. And that had been kind of put out. There have been a number of experiments, most notably in Vorgel, Austria, during the Great Depression, of a demurrage charged money. So that was the second idea, was demurrage. The third is this idea by Charles Eisenstein, who he had observed that whatever backs money, people tend to make more of. And so he said, well, why don't we back money with things that we like pristine forests, clean rivers? And so that's the third feature called natural capital backed money. The fourth feature is this idea that we had from kind of looking at the early days of the internet, where when the internet first came out, people were like, whoa, this is pretty cool. You could imagine putting a whole encyclopedia on the internet. And that was true, but it misunderstood the true potentiality of the internet, which is that you could put a whole encyclopedia on the internet, but that encyclopedia would be part of a much bigger, much richer information ecosystem that included but was not limited to the encyclopedia. And so similar, we could see the same thing happening with money, where kind of national fiat currencies still exist and still are important, but they are part of an ecosystem that also includes local currencies, regional currencies, global reference currencies, store value currencies, medium of exchange currencies, utility currencies, functional currencies, all of these interacting in this ecology in the same way that the web is an information ecology. And then finally, we thought that it would be useful to have money that can be created in a way that's not concomitant with the creation of new debt. All money right now is created through debt. And as a consequence, there is always more debt than there is money. And you could imagine a lot of other ways to bring money into existence. You can imagine people earning money into existence. You can imagine gifting money into existence. You can imagine universal basic incoming money into existence. And so those 5 features, it's at the point that we had a kind of general understanding of those features that then we set to work on the protocol and the technology. So we felt like we could have a coherent technology once we had kind of a product vision for it. But even those features are themselves come from our 2 core values, which is connectedness and unique purpose. We believe that everybody is connected, and we believe that everybody has a unique purpose. And those are important. It was important for us to articulate those values because over time, many more and different features could come out. And those features, I mean, we are at this point a decentralized protocol, so those features would not come from us, but from the community. And so we wanted to articulate the values from which those derive. And so that was a lot of the early conversation that was in parallel to the technical conversation.
So that is, rather revolutionary. I mean, from my standpoint, it's so beautiful for a project to lead with intention first and allow the technology to follow that. And so I'm just curious through this journey. It's been almost 3 years now, right, that you've been working on this project. What have been the biggest challenges that you face, and how have you navigated them?
Yeah, great question. I can take that from the technical perspective. When we talk about Celo now, a lot of people ask us, "Oh, why don't you just build this on Ethereum?" Ethereum could use a really great, easy to use mobile wallet. And the answer is, well, we tried. And so I would say that was kind of one of our first challenge was trying to achieve what we wanted to achieve on the Ethereum network. And it was only through that effort that we realized, okay, if we want to create a wallet like this that's fully decentralized, that is really easy to use, there's a few things that we need to do on the platform layer in order to get there. When we first built this wallet, I think Ethereum has done an incredible amount of work around its client protocol, and so we were really excited. We got it compiled down onto a mobile phone. We ran it, and then we waited a few days for all the headers to download for the client protocol to sync. And so that was the first technical challenge. And so we knew that we needed to address this. We knew that we needed to create a more efficient client protocol. And we got there, but it took 2 years of work, creating both a consensus protocol that had the capability to be more like client friendly, and then building out the zero knowledge proof system, Plumo, that we now have to effectively prove that a header is part of the chain. So I would say that was the first kind of big technical challenge. The second one was around our identity protocol. I think very early on we had this idea that we could map phone numbers to wallet addresses in a fully decentralized way. And this got us really excited because in many parts of the world, phone numbers have become the de facto main identifier that people use. I think WhatsApp has used this very effectively early on. It never created usernames. It simply relied on people's phone numbers and people's existing contact lists to kind of bootstrap a social network. That idea, I think, obviously is pretty central to what we've created, but it did have an issue early on, which was around privacy. It turns out that phone numbers don't have much entropy, and even if you hash phone numbers and maintain that mapping on chain, someone with enough compute could brute force all of these phone numbers and potentially then know who the users on Celo are. And that was a big issue for us for a long time, that we wanted to solve and that we worked hard to solve, but for the first year, a solution wasn't really even, we couldn't even see how we could get there. And it's only really in the last year that we came up with something that both gives us kind of that ease of use and while still preserving the privacy for our users. And so it wasn't until we made a lot of progress on Plumo and got comfortable with the BLS 12377 curve, which is a nice curve that allows you to do BLS signature aggregation, which you can also use for threshold cryptography. It's only once we gained a lot of experience with that curve that we were able to invent a new oblivious address mapping system that, in a fully oblivious and impossible to brute force way, allows each user to have a per user salt that's very high entropy that they can use to then add entropy to their phone number. Happy to go into a lot more detail, although I'm imagining that this might be a little too technical for this talk. But you know, when I think about technical challenges, I think this was probably the biggest one that really was took just a lot of effort to overcome. I don't know, Rene.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, he's rejoining. His computer crashed, so he'll be joining shortly.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Other technical challenges,
let me
crashing computers, spotty internet.
There we go. The wild, wild west here with technology. All right. I am looking for you, Rene, in our list. Let's see.
You just posted in the chat.
Yeah, I'm trying to find him in the people, and he's not coming up here. Let's see.
And you know, I think, I mean, I can keep going too while we.
Well, we actually have quite a few questions that are really awesome. Actually, one of them: what is the most surprising thing that you experienced on your journey of creating Celo? So maybe we can start with that as I look to get Rene back up on here.
I mean, I could list a couple. I mean, I think one thing that was a little bit surprising to me is we had from the beginning, we've had a very clear kind of mission around financial inclusion, and we did not expect how resonant that would be to people who we wanted to recruit to the project. I think, I mean, it clearly holds a lot of meaning, but a lot of times it's abstract. Financial inclusion can be abstract. Like, what does that mean? And so I didn't expect how excited people would be about the purpose. So that was one, and I think kind of as a side effect, it's just brought an amazing group of people together to work on the project that I feel privileged to be able to work with. So I think that's one surprise. I think a second surprise is, and this relates a little bit to another question that came up. Like when we had started, a lot of these ideas around things like, I mean, most clearly kind of a basic income or a basic dividend, but also around local currencies and demurrage and natural capital-backed currencies. These were fringe ideas at the time. And I've been surprised how quickly they've become more mainstream over really kind of this past year to a year and a half. So those are two things that have been surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, actually, yeah, this was the second one was definitely came to my mind first. Like, if we had, or 3 years ago, if you had asked me, will there be conversations about central bank digital currencies on Celo, or, kind of large scale cash transfer programs with big international organizations or even state actors, I would have said, yeah, no way. Like, it's like we're talking like, 10 years out at the earliest. And so it's exciting to see that, it feels like the readiness of sort of the broader kind of ecosystem has kind of accelerated. And I think a lot of it is due to kind of the work that has been happening. And, I think Ethereum in many ways has really paved some of the way, right, in terms of people running smaller pilots or projects and just getting more familiar with technology and its capabilities. And so I think it's been amazing to see, even in the last 3 years that we've been kind of active in this space, how much the community has grown and how much it's grown beyond sort of the initial kind of boundaries of, kind of the core kind of crypto people that self-identify as crypto and spending their kind of days and lives in this ecosystem, to also include just kind of the broader fintech community that is more and more looking at this as just kind of, infrastructure that can just, improve their kind of businesses and is maybe less kind of culturally addicted to it, or, from it looks at it more kind of pragmatic. And I think that's kind of bringing more and more of kind of a much more healthy, I think, balance to the ecosystem too, because I think, we're seeing this technology being discussed in places that, I think 5 years ago would have been unthinkable, which has been great. And some of that, I think, is due to, bigger organizations like, Facebook with Libra and others, putting a lot of money into this and coming into the space, which I think, you can have, you can think about it kind of, in many ways, but it's definitely helped from an awareness perspective. I think the second thing, what's been surprising is, I think one of the draw us to kind of work on this was always, sort of the fact that it would be kind of out in the open and open source, and really for like all the ideas, if I look kind of, if we go back to, the list that Marek mentioned of like 100 ideas, many of them actually are things that we see being built on Celo infrastructure, but there's no way that, this is one team that can take on, more than one or more than a few at most in sort of a lifetime. And so it's amazing just looking at, the folks in the chat here and seeing familiar names of people who have been working on some of these ideas already, and being able to team up and partner, even in these early days, has been probably for me kind of the most surprising, but also most rewarding part of this journey.
So another question we have, and thank you, it's so beautiful, Rene, those reflections. Is there a key assumption that you guys held pretty strongly a year ago that today has changed or no longer holds?
Well, maybe going a little further back, 2 years ago, we felt that creating self-custodial, easy-to-use wallets was so important in the world that we wanted to do it as quickly as possible. And to get there, we thought maybe an imperfect but possible way to get there quicker was to launch as a proof of work network. And I think we quickly realized that simply wouldn't work in that proof of work networks. Especially launching one from scratch, it's just extremely difficult to do that securely anymore. I think that time has passed. I think there are many other reasons why we ultimately decided to go with a stake model. I think we were always uncomfortable with the effect on global warming that proof of work networks cause, and one reason why we have a carbon offset fund in today's network. And ultimately, I think in order to get a light client that really worked well, it also proved the bunch of challenges. So I think that is definitely one thing that's changed from 2 years ago.
Maybe to add to that, just I saw one of the questions was also asking about, kind of the regulatory environment. I've, definitely been feeling really encouraged by the conversations we've been having with regulators, which I think when you read the headlines sometimes, or when you're coming into the space, I think this is always the kind of the big question mark, how can you actually rule this out, in various markets, and how does it fit into the regulatory frameworks? But I think when you kind of dig deeper and you actually understand where regulators are coming from and what they're optimizing for, you actually end up seeing a lot of alignment, right? I mean, no one wants to stand in the way of financial inclusion. I think we all working on this platform, right, are want to see it be used for kind of good things, for kind of advancing, prosperity, and not for, sort of bad kind of use cases, whatever they may be, right? And so I think there's generally alignment there. And so I think looking for kind of an open dialogue and having those conversations, educating, and finding sort of, and maybe even shaping some of the frameworks that start coming into place around like how digital assets should be treated and regarded, I think is a big part of this journey that often gets sort of maybe more of like a negative kind of connotation, or kind of it's like something that people are uncertain about. But I feel as a team and as a community, we've been both kind of open, transparent, but also kind of actively kind of reaching out to have that dialogue. And it's been I think looking back, I wouldn't have expected how well those conversations go, and how in many cases regulators actually lean in to learn more and wanting to kind of actively find ways to enable this. So that's been great.
Mm. And so another person, another viewer that's asking about the inner work and the outer work. So that's failure and success is more related to that inner self work, because the outer self is really an illusion and relative to the inner, and would love to know your opinions on this. So I don't know if you want to share a bit about maybe your own process around the inner work.
I could take a stab there. There's a philosopher named Ken Wilber who has a really wonderful orienting generalization where he basically divides up the world into 4 quadrants. On the y-axis, on the x-axis, it's inner and outer, and on the left axis, it's individual and collective. And so and by outer, it means like what can be seen. Inner means what cannot be seen, basically. So the outer, in the context of kind of work, in the context of a project, like the upper right-hand quadrant, the outer individual, that would be like the skills that we bring to the table, our technical skills, our systems building skills, and so on. That and that each one of us bring to the table, not just the 3 of us, but everybody working on the project. The inner left, the upper left-hand quadrant, which is inner and individual, that's kind of our spirit. The lower left is internal collective, that's culture, and the lower right is the external external collective, and that's the systems. And the basically kind of, I think Ken Wilber's view and our view is that basically kind of it's useful to be growing in all 4 quadrants at all times. He calls it we tetra evolve, you know. And the way that we think about that is the system that we put into place around that is this idea of the unfolding process. So the unfolding process was developed by this architect named Christopher Alexander in the context of building spaces. And he says, you know, you shouldn't design a house and then bring it to the site and build it. You should go to the site and you should ask yourself, what is the biggest strength of this site? And what's one thing that I could do to make it stronger? By the way, the name of the philosopher is Ken Wilber, W-I-L-B-E. But yeah, so Christopher Alexander was saying, go to the site and say, what is the strongest part of the site, and what is the easiest, most natural thing that I can do to make it stronger? And what is the weakest part of this site? And what is the most straightforward thing that I could do to address that weakness? And just do those 2 things. Step back, see what it's like, and then do it again. Ask those same questions again, and do it again, and do it again. And so in that context, the house unfolds rather than gets designed from the outside. And we can think about that not just for architecture, but for systems, is to say, to kind of just follow that iterative process, and we can follow that iterative process in each of the 4 quadrants. So we could say, personally, kind of from a skills perspective, what is one of my greatest strengths, and how can I strengthen that strength? And what is a weakness that I'd like to address, and what's the most straightforward way to address that weakness? We could do the same for spirit. We could do the same for culture. We could do the same for systems.
That's beautiful, Sep. And the questioner is actually an architect. It is shared in the chat, so I love the connection there. And the unfolding process is something that's actually used at cLabs with teams, right, on a regular basis to support the growth. So great. So another question we have here from Marco: how do you guys manage investors' interest versus purpose? Where's he here? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, and in some ways we've been fortunate that when we when we started Celo and we're looking for sort of looking for backers for the project, we already were able to tap into kind of a network of people that we had worked with previously, and so we had a good sense for who would be kind of mission aligned and who would maybe also kind of have a appetite for kind of a long-term journey, right? Because this is really, I think, many of the things that we are excited about are not necessarily going to come to fruition in the first 1 to 3 years or so, right? And it's definitely not every investor or kind of people who look to participate in these projects maybe share that sort of long-term appetite. And so I think we were very fortunate that among really all of the early backers, it's people who have either firsthand experienced shortcomings of the financial system, or have done their own research in sort of in this area, who had been in the ecosystem and seen sort of the need. And so in many ways it was less of a pitch but a conversation where we were kind of completing each other's sentences. And particularly kind of thinking back to some of the early conversations with Olaf at Polychain and the team over at Andreessen. So I think that was really helpful. I think we also recognize that we've been fortunate to kind of already have those connections. And I think a big part of the Celo journey has been to think about how do we scale that to the broader kind of ecosystem, and recognizing that many of those ideas will likely not be built directly by us or our team at cLabs, but by people in the community. And so as part of the last kind of round we did last year, we actually talked to both Polychain and Andreessen, said, hey, we should set up an ecosystem fund so that we can more easily support entrepreneurs all around the world that may not be in a place where there is the rich ecosystem of angel investors or people to support that journey and take that long-term view. And kind of to our surprise, Olaf and also the Katie and the crew at Andreessen were super supportive, and we set it up even before even kind of like the platform was launched, and have seen a bunch of really great kind of projects already kind of coming through that being evaluated. I think we'll probably see sort of the first few investments being announced in the coming months now that the platform is live. And I think that's for us, I think helping in a way, like the beautiful thing about kind of crypto and ICOs, ICOs as bad of a rap as they have, was that it in some ways made it possible for a much larger number of people to participate early on in these networks. And now ICOs, were not kind of the right implementation of doing that. They had definitely their shortcomings. We decided to not do an ICO for many of those reasons. But conceptually, having participants in the community, and particularly people who are builders, participate, that's actually a really beautiful concept, right? And so I think thinking about how to kind of make capital funding available more broadly, I think is a big, not just for us with Celo, but for the whole community. I think is going to be a big topic kind of going forward, because capital still is concentrated in a few places, right? And the opportunity is actually, we see the opportunity not necessarily, like the places where the opportunity doesn't necessarily overlap with where the capital is.
Mm-hmm. And along those same lines of that question, we have Marco in the chat. Why the hybrid structure between cLabs and Celo Foundation? And maybe what are some learnings there that you're discovering in that differentiation?
Yeah, good question, Marco. I mean, I think it all goes back to ultimately Celo is and should be bigger than just kind of the work that we're doing in our team, and I think that's already happening. If you look at the various kind of ecosystem efforts, and even just to pick kind of one with sort of the Celo Alliance for Prosperity, where we now have about 80 organizations that are all building, integrating Celo infrastructure. I think cLabs is kind of just one of many organizations, and actually, already now, I think a lot of the early adoption we'll see will actually not come directly from the work that cLabs is doing, but some of the Alliance members. And so that's exciting. But I think in order to kind of set up Celo to really kind of succeed in the long term, and kind of in a way exist even when the three of us are no longer around, it was kind of a necessary step to put a structure in place that kind of goes hand in hand with that. And so the foundation really is kind of a body kind of for the community, right? A mechanism to provide sort of kind of guidance to where Celo is going, and also has kind of resources tied to that. And then cLabs more tactically, really that's our team that, is the team that, build a lot of the initial infrastructure to get us to where we are today. But, even, I think ever since open sourcing last summer, that has been kind of changing, right? And we've seen this become truly a community effort. And, looking at the last milestone of the standing up of the mainnet, which was done, actually cLabs was not involved in that. It was done by the validator community. That's been beautiful, kind of to see how really cLabs now is just a part of many.
Yeah, what I love about that is that you are seeding this idea, right? But then giving it away to the community, and that's really that's what decentralization is all about, right? The idea and the vision is so much larger than any individual, even group of individuals. So it's so beautiful that this is coming into fruition in this way.
And it's also an organic metaphor rather than an industrial metaphor. Is really kind of seeding rather than manufacturing.
And so we have a few more questions here. Let's see, we've got 7 minutes left. Is there any competition or partnership to Mojaloop's project? So many projects go in that direction of banking the unbanked. Is there a differentiation worth mentioning here? Or how do you work with other projects that are looking to achieve the same mission?
Yeah, I can take a first step, and then others feel free to chime in. I think generally, it's always, I think we're often sort of inclined to look at an industry, an ecosystem, and say, okay, who is competing with whom? And I think for us, it's really been less of that. And even like with many of the projects that kind of externally get painted as, competitors, if you actually kind of look under the hood, we're more likely to kind of be collaborating on some of, for example, solving scalability or other sort of, technological kind of things that will move the entire ecosystem forward. And so I tend to think less about, how do we kind of compete with project X or Y or initiative X or Y, but how do we kind of grow the overall kind of pie, right? And, even if everyone in the space and in the broader kind of, fintech ecosystem executes perfectly, we'll only make a small dent, on sort of our kind of the metrics we're optimizing for in the short term. And so from that perspective, I think there are kind of there are efforts that we are more, I think skeptical about, right? When you have payment schemes that are not respecting end users' privacy, or where the data kind of around payments is used for surveillance or other things, right? I think there's definitely you could look sort of at the global landscape, and you could kind of see efforts where you say, hey, actually, this is something that sort of as an open kind of community we have to kind of steer. We are probably like the one outlet to that happening. And so from that perspective, there's definitely kind of efforts that are not necessarily kind of have the same mission. And so, can kind of call those competitors, but But ultimately, like, I think if you just look at where you can have an impact and where the needs are, there's so much kind of blank space, right? That it's, it's hard to kind of look or think about competition in that context, but it's more like, how do we get more resources to accelerate actually bringing this to people that need this? So that would be kind of my answer. But also, like, I think, ultimately, Celo is kind of an open infrastructure that longer term, I think a lot of the products or systems out there may end up kind of leveraging and using, right? And so I think early on, we're starting to see that, but I think longer term, again, even beyond sort of just collaborating, I would love to kind of help the fintechs out there kind of understand how they could make advantage of Celo infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'll just second that. I think in the same way that kind of a zoomed out perspective has a different creates a different orientation to success and failure, it also creates a different orientation to competition. I mean, I think basically we just don't see it. We see our mission is to create a financial system that leads to prosperity for all. It doesn't mean that we have to do it all. Like, that's explicitly not the mission, and we very explicitly cannot do it all. And so, as such, I mean, I think our spirit is much more a spirit of collaboration with lots of people.
I love that. So just to close, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for anyone out there that has a big vision they're looking to bring into reality?
Start with 100 ideas.
I would say start small. I think Rome wasn't built overnight. That's maybe a poor metaphor, but it's definitely, if I kind of look back to some of those early ideas that kind of helped shape our thinking around what Celo could be. Those are, start with a user and kind of very specific to, hey, how do we make a cash transfer program more efficient, right? Which, if that was like, that's not the vision, but it's definitely something that we hope Celo overall can accomplish. But it sort of paves the way, and it kind of gives you kind of concrete starting point to actually dig in and define what this thing looks like, and be open to feedback, be pragmatic. I think the biggest, I think Marek said it earlier, the biggest risk is to get kind of too enamored with your own kind of idea and kind of walk down kind of a rabbit hole, and so my advice.
And I'll add one thing, which is, well, actually, while that question was asked, I looked up a quote, which is one of my favorite quotes, that I think summarizes this piece of what I want to give, which is Viktor Frankl had said. He said, so Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychologist who ended up being detained in the concentration camps during the Holocaust, and he emerged writing and wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is a beautiful book, basically applying his academic knowledge to his own experience. And it's one of the more beautiful books I read. I recommend it to everybody. But in the foreword, he had said, like, that book he had not intended to publish under his name, and it ended up becoming his most successful of all of his books. And so he said what he advises people who ask him, his students, is he says, don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as an unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. So that's a quote that I love, and that's the advice that I would give to anybody starting.
What great words to complete this fireside chat with. Thank you, Sep. Thank you, Marek. Thank you, Rene, for taking the time out. It's a very busy time right now for Celo. And so thanks for creating the space and the openness with the community to ask these questions and to grow that transparency and humility. So thank you all also for joining today. We will be continuing with the Prosper series the next few weeks, at least until the end of June. So please join the community to keep this conversation going on the Discord channel, which the link should be below, chat.celo.org. We will have a Zoom chat after this for community members that would like to meet each other. This, again, is an opportunity to bring in some of that connection that the Prosper Retreat in person offers. And so we want to offer that up after these sessions. So may all beings prosper in their unique purpose and in their connection, and look forward to seeing you all next week. And thanks again, all of you, for joining today.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.